Hello and welcome. As this time we look at the 19th Sunday of our church year and the readings assigned for our consideration. The first reading comes from the book of Wisdom, chapter 18, verses 6 through 9. The second reading comes from the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 11, verses 1 through 2, and verses 9 through 18. And the gospel comes from Luke's gospel, chapter 12, verses 32 through 48. So let me explain, as we're looking at the readings this week, that as we are recording this, they are doing work outside of our church, and so that may interfere to some degree with the clarity of what we're able to do. Also adding to that is the fact that the gospel reading chosen this time has different parts and is therefore a bit more confusing or developed in different ways. And for that reason, I've also brought the text here because maybe we're going to have to look at it. Let me at least start by saying that the gospel reading that we hear today is divided into three parts. The first part is a teaching on possessions. This would be verses 32 through 34. The second is a story that demonstrates the importance of watchfulness, and this would be verses 35 through 40. And then the third part is an instruction about the responsibility of leadership, and this would be verses 41 through 48. So as you can see, there's a number of items kind of brought together here. The general themes that are brought to our attention this time are watchfulness, preparedness, and fidelity. And they are loosely joined, and the emphasis is slightly different in each case. So I kind of suggest there's a lot that's going on here. Now, the first part continues an idea that we heard last time, namely that we need to be careful about the accumulation of wealth and the danger of greed. And so this is how it begins. And again, I'll just give a little bit of the reading where Jesus says, "Sell your belongings and give alms. Provide money bags for yourselves that do not wear out, an inexhaustible treasure in heaven where no thief can reach nor moth can destroy. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be." So that's the first section, and you can see in a certain way, first of all, this message is addressed to the disciples, and secondly, it's a continuation in a certain way of Jesus' teaching last time. So where does one place one's heart or one's trust? When the heart is set on, so the teaching goes, corruptible things, then we are consumed by a constant need to guard the things that we have. And you remember last time that the man had chosen to build a bigger tower or a bigger building to keep the harvest he had, and that God had said, "This night your life is asked of you, and so where will all these treasures go?" So here, Jesus tells his disciples, well, as they apparently not only are going out on the mission of the church, but also on the mission of life, to be careful what things they truly place their heart on, and that it should not be in material things. All right, so without milking that too much, that would be a continuation of Jesus' teaching on possessions. Next section is a story that talks about the importance of watchfulness. Now, here in verses 35 to 38, the emphasis is on, and the story is about a gatekeeper. Later on, in verses 42 through 46, the emphasis will be on a servant who is entrusted with supervision. So there's a number of different themes that are going on here. All right. This little parable indicates that one should be watchful. All right, now what's the gatekeeper's job? Well, you remember that many of the ancient cities, even the smaller ones, had walls around them, and that there were particular entrances to particularly cities that were walled. And why were they walled? Well, protection, either to keep the enemy out or to keep people in. I don't know. But at night, there were gates to these towns and villages, well, not villages too much, and the gates were closed. But the gatekeeper needed to be ever aware and alert in case someone needed to come in, and usually no one was allowed to go out. So all of that, again, is a kind of cultural, as we have noticed earlier on, background to the time. Now, all right, so the gatekeeper should be watchful, all right? So he gives two things that the gatekeeper should be doing. One is to gird his loins. All right, now what does that mean? That means, remember, they had long robes, so therefore he had to get his garment off the ground so that he could move quickly, so that if he had to, and however they girded them, these flowing robes that people wore. This was pretty normal, remember, and therefore allowed the movement to be quicker if and when it was necessary. So keep in mind again that we're looking here at this little parable is talking, and this is where I'm not sure that maybe we should just refer to the parable, which says that the servant who awaits his master's return from a wedding. Now, we've noticed on other occasions that weddings in this culture often took place quite late at night, okay? Because on the day of the wedding, the longer the groom argued with the parent of the bride for a dowry, the more honorable was the whole relationship. And so sometimes, even though they knew this, what was going to wind up, would go late in the evening. Then the groom would bring, you remember we spoke about this, would bring the bride and her entourage into his home, and then the celebration would take place. Well, now, if this guy returns late from one of these gatherings, that's what this little account is suggesting. So if the master comes, all right, he's got to be ready quickly to welcome him and to give him a light, something to see. So that's also what he says. Blessed are those servants whom the master finds vigilant on his arrival. Now, then he says, and this is interesting, if he does, and when he does, the master will then say to those who are waiting, sit down and let's have something to eat, and I will serve you. Now, that is very contradictory to the way in which things would work. The only analogy might be here is, although this is not found in Matthew's account or in Luke's account, but is found in John's account, to remember that at the Last Supper, as it began, Jesus had washed the feet of his disciples, and he had also on other occasions said, that I come to serve, not to be served. And so therefore, that would be the reason why this extraordinary verse is included here. Would he really, those who heard this story would blink their eye and say, really? That's what he would do? That's a little far-fetched. But as I say, the remembrance of Jesus' words, I am among you as one who serves, might be the basis for including this text. So be ready for service, all right? And that seems to be part of this little section of Luke's story that we are hearing. You must also be prepared, and then the ending part of this, for at an hour you do not expect, the Son of Man will come. It's interesting. Of course, there's a little bit of a thread of that, and that still may be part of the idea that was prevalent in the thinking of many of the first Christians, that the coming of Jesus, here's the nickel word, eschatological coming of Jesus, was imminent. And had it occurred by the time that Luke writes his gospel, it had not. And so Luke begins to kind of suggest we should be ready, but keep in mind, we don't know when it will happen. And if you knew that the thief was going to come, wouldn't you be alert and say, as the thief was at your front door, he did not ring the doorbell, but he did, and no one answered, and he crept in? Wouldn't you be prepared? See, so all of that is, again, part of what is being suggested here in this little section. All right, so I haven't read it all, but you can read that part. Now, it shifts once as we come to the next section. Peter is pictured as saying, is this parable for us or for everyone? And the Lord says, well, the faithful and wise and prudent steward whom the master put in charge will make sure that everyone gets something to eat when he needs that. All right, and so verses 42 through 46 talk about the faithful steward. The steward is the one who is in charge of making sure that all the other servants have enough to eat. And so he is blessed when he does this job faithfully, and in fact is given more responsibility. All right, so here we're looking at, and as I mentioned, this would be the latter part of the reading that we're hearing this time, a servant who is entrusted with supervision. Now, here's where, again, a little variation of interpretation takes place. The steward or the servant may see the delay of the master coming back as an opportunity to exploit the situation and to ingrain or to make a profit, if it want, for himself. So the delay, well, the guy isn't coming. Perhaps let me check. He's probably at the wedding longer. He won't be here too soon. I will take advantage of this. And here's what the texts say. The servant who knew his master's will but did not make preparations nor act in accord with his will shall be beaten severely. So now we have the text where if you don't do your job, you're going to pay for it. Severely here means actually the word used here is cut in two, and it's the idea that if he doesn't do his job, he will be dismembered. But and we're not quite sure whether that actually happened, but you get the idea. So the faithful steward is the one who is ready, always takes care of those for whom he is given responsibility, and if he does, and perhaps these are the words that Jesus is hoping his disciples will carry out, and that those who, Luke, who read this section of the gospel, will also carry out. So preparedness, therefore, another way of kind of looking at this section a little bit, does not mean simply waiting, but it means that one must be responsible for the tasks that one has as the delay or as the waiting takes place. So you can see these are, the master is long in coming. Is this Luke's kind of idea of the coming of Jesus? Is the master here, in fact, Christ? And is what is going to happen what is known as the parousia, the coming of Jesus in glory? But as I mentioned, Luke is also aware of the fact, by the time that he writes this gospel, that has not occurred. So we have the image, therefore, as I mentioned, of the gatekeeper and of the servant who is or the steward who is in charge of the household. Who is in charge of the household of the church? Well, that would be the leaders of the time, and they need to be faithful to their task. So there's different ways in which the material in this particular section of the gospel might be understood. This idea of vigilance, by the way, of waiting for the coming of the Lord, of course, is used in our liturgical year during the Advent season, a kind of section of let's get ready for and prepare for the celebration of the coming of Jesus and the birth of Jesus. So although certainly we find this now here in the middle of the summer, but perhaps a reminder that the coming of the Lord is always there, and that we should be always ready for and alert to accept the Lord and to work with the Lord's ways. So a word about the first reading, which comes from the book of Wisdom. Now, the section from the book of Wisdom that we hear is one in which the author has developed a contrast between the people of Israel and the Egyptians. And what we're hearing in the section that is chosen this time is the latter part of the story of the Exodus. Now, what it is, just before it happens, the children of God, and I thought we'd just back this up a little because we have a little opportunity here to do that. The children of Israel profited by the phenomena which takes place in Egypt in the form of plagues. So here's the contrast. What is hurtful to the Egyptians is helpful to the Israelites. Now, this is the kind of scenario that the book of Wisdom develops. He develops it into 5 segments, which figure either the contrast or opposition. So, on the positive side for Israel, here are the 5. Water from the rock. Remember that they were in the wilderness. Moses strikes the rock and water comes out. Quail, the birds that fly in and give them meat. Manna, we have certainly talked about this many of times. A pillar of fire, which guides the Israelites in the nighttime and which protects them from the coming of the Pharaoh's force. And finally, the glorification of Israel by drowning the Pharaoh's troops. So all those would be things that bring to Israel help and reveal the wonderfulness that God is on their side. Now, on the other side of that coin, or matching these kind of gifts, are woes or plagues. The Nile runs red. Various insects and animals take over the land of Egypt and cause everybody trouble. There are storms that sweep through Egypt. There is darkness that lasts for 3 days. No one can see anything. Can you imagine total darkness and not even being able to see your hand in front of you? And finally, the destruction of the firstborn son. So you see, you have 5 wonderful things that Israel can blink its eye and say, God is helping and supporting us. On the other hand, Israel could say, oh, these plagues are helping us, but what are they doing to the Egyptians? How are they being harmed? So here's the setting here is really Moses tells the Israelites to be prepared when the night of the Passover is going to take place. He tells them to slaughter the lambs, the appropriate ones, and to take the blood, put it on the doorposts of the homes, and then to prepare a meal. And according to, as this scenario develops, the meal is eaten on the night of the 10th plague. Who's it eaten? And this is where wisdom reading that we hear takes place. Who are those who will eat this? Those who are in their homes, have kind of slaughtered the lamb, put the blood where it is supposed to be. What this is a development of Greek literary writing known as the synkris, syncris. It was a kind of comparison of points that contrast. And here the contrast is between the plight of the Israelites and that of the Egyptians. It shows how God reversed the very means that the Egyptians had prepared. Now, keep in mind that the Pharaoh, remember years ago, had ordered that the firstborn sons be thrown into the Nile, be drowned. And so now keep that in mind, that that's the basis here when the firstborn sons of the Egyptians are going to be killed. So there is that contrast. Certainly that those familiar with the Hebrew Bible are aware of. So this shows how God reversed the very means that the Egyptians had planned. And God spares the people of Israel and reverses the fate of these 2 people. So here's the scenario. At the very time that the angel of God is moving through Egypt, killing the firstborn of every household, the Israelites were offering the lamb as a substitute for a sacrifice. So the blood of the lamb that protects their house against the Egyptians suffer bloodshedding by the death of all of the firstborn. So if you like that, that is kind of the contrast that the wisdom writer brings to bear here in offering this episode. So that would be kind of the story that is found there. All right, I think that probably is, well, we have just a little bit of time, so I will return to the second reading, which is a long section of what is known as the letter to the Hebrews. Now, I think on other occasions we have had selections from this work. It is called a letter, but it really isn't it really isn't so much a letter as it is really a discourse, okay? And earlier times, if you have earlier Bibles, it said that here is the letter of Paul to the Hebrews. Well, everyone now agrees that Paul did not write this. We don't know who wrote it, so it stands alone as a unique work in the collection of New Testament writers. But here's how it begins. Faith is the realization of what is hoped for and the evidence of not those things not seen. Because of it, the ancients were well attested. Faith, and then it goes on, as we will hear, and it's rather long reading, argues for the faith of Abraham as really the basis for what he believed. In other words, Abraham, and this is a kind of thesis developed by those who interpreted this letter, Abraham did not have the commandments of Moses. Abraham had, by his actions, demonstrated his faith in God, that is, faith in this strange and mysterious God who called him, you remember, to leave his own land and to go to the land that he had promised, was what was characterized or characteristic of Abraham's time. So Abraham is a model of faith. Now, exactly why this reading fits in this time, we might not be so sure of. All right, so that's the Hebrew writing, okay? And keep in mind that it is in this letter, or this work, we call it a letter, but it's in this work that Jesus is described as a high priest. It is only in this work that any idea of the priesthood of Jesus is suggested. So that's what, of course, in other ways makes this particular work quite important. All right, so as we come to an end this time, or a beginning, depending on how you want to take some of the readings that we have looked at, we are encouraged, certainly, and I think that's what Luke had in mind here, to be ever watchful, to be ever prepared, and to be ever faithful to the invitations that are given to us, to be attentive to the opportunities, and to be maybe bringing, if we could and when we can, the light of Jesus into the world. Just as the Israelites, and maybe that's where the first reading comes, were prepared at the time of the first Passover for leaving Israel. Remember that they were to leaving Egypt, were prepared to kind of get their loins ready, to stand prepared for that night God would tell Moses to lead them out of Egypt. So there's a lot of different things going on. Hope that some of this makes a little bit of sense as we celebrate liturgy this week. Thank you for being with us. Hope to see you again.